mu izina rya Yesu Kristo. Amen. So we are going to start with our country spokesperson, Andrew Magombo from Malawi. Can you hear us? Andrew Magombo, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
You only have 1 minute.
All right. Hello from Malawi. I have a report of our group. And this report is dated from 25 September 2021 to 1st October 2021. Our weekly activities on 25 September 1, we attended a Zoom meeting where I Love Black People mission was discussed through a speech by co-founder, followed by lectures by Nana H.U.R, Sirius, and Professor Wright. On 27th, the moderator complained of 0% rating of our group for week 4. That's last week, and encouraged members and ambassadors to participate actively as a necessity for reaching the goal and purpose of I Love Black People movement. All members on the same date and ambassadors were as well reminded and encouraged to do their duties and responsibilities, thus submitting reports, making business recommendations, inviting people to the community, suggesting topics for the newsletter, and making COVID-19 updates. On 28 September, we had our regular newsletter, which highlighted our 8 essential categories. That's education, health, legal, finance, transportation, beauty, accommodation, and food. And the community reminded all members to confirm their attendance to Saturday's Pan-African Zoom conference. On 29th September 2021, all social media accounts for I Love Black People movement were shared among its members, who were encouraged to share them with family and friends to raise their awareness. On 30th September, all members and ambassadors joined brothers and sisters from Botswana in commemorating Botswana's declaration of independence from the United Kingdom, which occurred on 30th September 1966. Current status of COVID-19 in Malawi as of yesterday, 1st October 2021. Vaccinations, we have 498,701. Total cases, 61,598. New cases, yesterday we had 17. Full recoveries, 55,453. New deaths, deaths, total deaths, we have 2,282 since COVID-19 started. And yesterday we had no new deaths. This report was compiled and submitted by Andrew Magombo, ambassador from Malawi. I am because we are. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew from Malawi. Up next, you have Loland Gassam from Cameroon. Loland Gassam, can you hear us?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, Loland.
Thank you very much, brothers and sisters. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you very much, brothers and sisters, for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, you have only 1 minute. Roland Gassam, can you hear us? Hello, Roland Gassam, can you hear us? Yes, up next we have Robert Kasivuru from Uganda. Robert Kasivuru, can you hear us? Robert Kasivuru, can you hear us? Hello? Up next we have Robert Kasivuru, can you hear us? Yes, up next we have Roland Gassam. Roland Gassam, can you hear us? Hello, Roland Gassam?
Yeah, hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
No, sorry. There's not a network, it's not good here.
Okay, you only have 1 minute to present your report.
The network is not good here, Yvonne.
Oh, okay, no problem.
I think I could stand it for about maybe 20 minutes before I left. Where these dogs will work all day, take advice,
I love Black people.
try to be
Is a
helpful.
global accommodation. I Love Black People is a global community protecting Black people from racism and xenophobia.
The purpose of our platform is to be a guide to Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses globally.
We currently have thousands of business recommendations from 142 countries and 300 cities.
Our platform focuses on 8 essential categories: legal, transportation, finance, health, education and childcare, beauty, accommodation, and food.
With your help, we are creating a safer world and making our voices heard worldwide.
Join our movement and recommend a business today. I love Black people.
Please visit iloveblackpeople.com. I Love Black People is a global community protecting Black people from racism and xenophobia.
The purpose of our platform is to be a guide to Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses globally.
We currently have thousands of business recommendations from 142 countries and 300 cities.
Our platform focuses on 8 essential categories: legal, transportation, finance, health, education and childcare, beauty, accommodation, and food.
With your help, we are creating a safer world and making our voices heard worldwide.
Join our movement and recommend a business today. I love Black people.
Please visit iloveblackpeople.com. I Love Black People is a global community protecting Black people from racism and xenophobia.
The purpose of our platform is to be a guide to Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses globally.
We currently have thousands of business recommendations from 142 countries and 300 cities.
Our platform focuses on 8 essential categories: legal, transportation, finance, health, education and childcare, beauty, accommodation, and food.
With your help, we are creating a safer world and making our voices heard worldwide.
Join our movement and recommend a business today. I love Black people.
Please visit iloveblackpeople.com. I Love Black People is a global community protecting Black people from racism and xenophobia.
The purpose of our platform is to be a guide to Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses globally.
We currently have thousands of business recommendations from 142 countries and 300 cities.
Our platform focuses on 8 essential categories: legal, transportation, finance, health, education and childcare, beauty, accommodation, and food.
With your help, we are creating a safer world and making our voices heard worldwide.
Join our movement and recommend a business today. I love Black people.
Please visit iloveblackpeople.com. I Love Black People is a global community protecting Black people from racism and xenophobia.
The purpose of our platform is to be a guide to Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses globally.
We currently have thousands of business recommendations from 142 countries and 300 cities.
Our platform focuses on 8 essential categories: legal, transportation, finance, health, education and childcare, beauty, accommodation, and food.
With your help, we are creating a safer world and making our voices heard worldwide.
Join our movement and recommend a business today. I love Black people.
Please visit iloveblackpeople.com.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon once again. We are going to start our call in a few minutes, and feel free to write in the comment section your name, the country, and the date you joined the movement. Thank you very much.
I Love Black People is a global community protecting Black people from racism and xenophobia.
The purpose of our platform is to be a guide to Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses globally.
We currently have thousands of business recommendations from 142 countries and 300 cities.
Our platform focuses on 8 essential categories: legal, transportation, finance,
Yes, so today we are going to start the Pan-African healthcare class. Nana Akua, can you hear us?
Okay, I think I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. All right, so you ready to start?
Yes.
All right. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I am in transition a little bit, and now that she knows which number I am, I'm gonna take my video off for a minute, because I don't know, you probably don't want to see me driving in the car. Because then I'll have to get out and go into my office. So let's just talk without my picture for a moment. And hopefully everyone has gotten the opportunity to see the materials that I've sent most days this week. This is the 4th week. So our last class for the Pan-African Healthcare course in this cycle. And we are talking about detoxification and cleansing. So if you are able, and if you give me a few moments, I will get to my computer and be able to share my screen. I think I may even have them on my phone. But if you've joined us before, you know I'm a little bit challenged with some of the technology. So I don't want to be struggling trying to pull up the handouts at this moment. But basically, we're talking about how to cleanse and how to detox the body. We know that we've talked about various topics, herbs, homeopathic remedies, essential oils, flower remedies. We've talked about de-stressing or stress release. We've spoken about my mind is drawing a blank. But we've had various topics that we have discussed. And so the last piece that I felt was necessary to really get a really good grasp on healing yourself and being well is knowing how to cleanse the body and how to detox. And we know that there are different ways to do that. Detox has become very popular these days, and colon cleansing in particular. But we know that there are different paths of elimination that have to occur because we have several organs' responsibility to cleanse the body. And so we're going to talk about all of those things. And forgive all the noises here. Okay, great. Okay, making sure I still have you in my Bluetooth and not in the car. So we're going to focus on different ways to cleanse. We're going to discuss internal cleansing. We're going to talk about external cleansing. We know that internally there are juices, food, and different herbs and natural remedies that we can use to cleanse the body internally. But then we also know that externally we can cleanse the body with different baths, through massage or touch therapies. We know that we can do full body baths, foot baths, in brushing, and all sorts of ways in which to cleanse the body externally. If we are talking about the paths of elimination, we know that when we're internally cleansing, we know that the body has 5 paths of elimination. And they include the lungs, the skin, the kidneys, the liver, and the colon. We know that the skin, of course, is our largest organ. And a lot of times that is overlooked in terms of our overall cleansing and detoxification, because a lot of times we take that for granted. And now I'm in front of my computer, so I would prefer to log in this way, if you indulge me for one more second. Okay, not the Facebook, okay. So, okay, great. I think this will be better. I'm now in front of the computer. I don't like not being able to see everyone. And I don't like having to move around and rush. So, join with computer audio. You see me now? Myself. Oh, okay. You got me now?
Yes.
Okay. You was working me, girl. I had to rush from one whole other place to here, trying to talk and teach while trying to drive. Okay. I was trying not to say, no, I'm not available right now, but hey, we made it happen. So it works having your beautiful face on there. That helped, not just the black screen. So, because your face was the only one I could see. And now I see a couple of others. Yay, thank you all for joining us. Okay, so I was kind of going, not necessarily in order, even though of course I know this material, but it's better to be seated and comfortable. So we know the importance of cleansing the body. We know that detoxification includes kind of cleansing or washing or removing toxins or poisonous substances, harmful substances from the body, or at least mitigating, the effects of those toxins, right? So we know why it's important to cleanse, but I wanted to just give that actual definition. And I usually like to ask people, what is your definition or your understanding of what cleansing or detoxification is? And I still maybe like to do that. I think we have a slightly smaller group today, but if you'll indulge me and perhaps share what your thoughts on detoxification or cleansing are, I'd appreciate it. If there are things that you do to cleanse your body or to detox, that would be great. I usually use the terms detoxification and cleansing interchangeably. They have very similar, very slight differences in definition, but cleansing, I just gave the definition of detoxification: removing poisonous or harmful substances from the body, or neutralizing or mitigating the effects of those toxins or poisons. Cleansing, basically a process of making something thoroughly clean, right? You might rid the body of unhealthy, unnecessary substances, or you may cleanse by washing, right? So all of these are very similar, pretty much interchangeably. But we know that it's important because not everything that we come into contact with is of healthful benefit, right? We know that not everything we eat
has nutrition that the body can use. So we know that we'll have to filter out or remove those toxins. We know that not everything we come into contact environmentally, skin creams, toxic gases that we breathe in to the lungs, liquids or fluids that we maybe drink, alcohol and other things that may be toxic to the liver. So we know that there are many ways that we intoxicate ourselves, right? So there's always going to be a need to detoxify the body. So that's why this piece is so important. And if you let me share my screen, Yvonne, I would appreciate it. I see, okay.
Yes, allowed.
I see. Are you seeing the cleansing and detoxification? Even though it's upside down. Are you seeing cleansing and detox slide?
Yes.
Okay. Good. So let me scroll down. So we are beyond this. We've talked about the definitions. And so we know the importance of it. So now let me just, and let me see. Okay, somebody put it. Okay, hello. All right, so nobody's giving me an answer as to what cleansing or detoxification is or ways that they cleanse the body. Okay, fine, I'll continue on. Maybe you'll participate in a little bit, right? So we know why it's important. We have to get out anything that's bad for the body. We need to remove that. We have to cleanse the body. And in doing that, we know that there are different side effects. We know that there are certain symptoms of cleansing or detoxification, and you need to know that these are normal and you should expect them to some degree. So they include things like body aches, headaches, body odor, bad breath, weakness or fatigue, skin rashes, purging, releasing, toxins from the body. All of these are very common, right? So we should expect these things and know that this is part of cleansing and detoxification. I mentioned earlier, before I got to the screen and I was given an overview, there are 5 paths of elimination. So we know that the kidneys, the liver, the colon, the skin, and the lungs are paths of elimination, meaning these are organs in the body that are responsible for filtering out toxins. They are responsible for cleansing different parts of the body. So we know that the lungs is what keeps oxygen circulating in the body. And when we detox it, we're getting rid of carbon monoxide and other gaseous toxins, right, that have entered the body. And we know when we do deep cleansing breaths, we're putting that good, pure air, hopefully, back into the lungs and improving our circulation and the circulation of oxygen or air in the body. We know that the skin, gets rid of pretty much anything that needs to come out of the body that can't come through the other paths of elimination. And so a lot of times when the skin is clear, we know that that's a sign of good health. We know that that's a sign of cleansing and purity when we have good, clear skin, when it's elastic, and moist. We know that these are signs of good health. However, if we have a lot of skin eruptions and rashes and abscesses and cysts and boils and things of that nature, that's an indication that perhaps the body needs to be cleansed because it is releasing toxins through the skin, okay? The colon, we know we have to get rid of any excess undigested food that we've not removed from our regular bowel movements, or any toxins or substances that need to be cleansed or purged, has to come through the colon. We know that the digestive system includes the colon or ends in the colon, starts with the mouth, But as we take in food and it's digested in the stomach and then it moves to the small intestines, that's where the nutrients are absorbed into the body. What's good is then, utilized and sent to different parts of the body, different vitamins, minerals, even our medications that we take. All of that is absorbed by the small intestines. And then it moves to the colon or the large intestines for removal. The things that really don't have any use, the things that's just junk, that's just pure toxins that, had no health benefit, or otherwise couldn't digest through the other processes, through the gastrointestinal tract, right? So the colon, for most people, that's something that happens every day. It's normal, it's natural. You don't necessarily have to have special efforts to cleanse it, unless you are irregular, unless you do take a lot of medications and you eat poorly, or that you feel some of the symptoms of toxicity, like you're sluggish and you have low energy and you have excess weight and things like that. These are signs that you do, in fact, need to do particular cleansing and detoxification of the colon. The liver, we know, is responsible for filtering the blood in the body, right? And we know that it works hand in hand with the gallbladder. So these two organs are filtering organs. We know that any alcohol, medication, and other, substances that have to be kind of purified out by the liver, it works really, really hard. So it has a great and mighty job. However, the liver is very resilient, but if we overwork it, it will fail you. But it can even regenerate itself. So the liver is very strong, but anyone who has any kind of chronic illness, diabetes, heart disease, fibromyalgia, arthritis, high blood pressure, any number of illnesses, and especially if you're on medication, all right, we know that liver cleansing is key, because you have to filter out all the medications that have kind of come through the body that are needed to treat those conditions. If you have skin problems, right, we also know that that's when you would do a liver cleanse as well. So there are many reasons and many signs that a liver cleanse is in order. And then the kidneys, we know, work hand in hand with our blood pressure, as well as our bladder and our urinary tract. It is responsible for filtering out fluids or liquids from the body. And it usually, of course, comes out in the form of your urine. But any excess water, weight, or waste that's in the body is filtered out through the kidneys. If we drink a lot of sodas and other unhealthy drinks, the kidneys have to work overtime to kind of process out those fluids or those liquids from the body. Indication of kidney problems or the need to cleanse or detox the kidneys would be maybe uncontrollable blood pressure. It may be frequent urination or some other issues with your urinary tract or your bladder. If there's water gain or edema, which is water retention in the body, there are different indications such as that let us know that we maybe need to cleanse or detox the kidneys, okay? So that's just a quick overview of those paths of elimination and how you can assess for yourself whether you should do a cleanse. And we know that we may use herbs for these cleanses. We may use foods, we may do juicing, we may use essential oils for different baths or different compresses on different parts of the body. But these are some of the ways that we, I clicked something. What did I do? Oh, I'm always doing something. What do I do?
Yes, we can still see the lecture.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Okay, I just can't. Huh. Okay. I can't even see it myself. What am I doing? Jeez. Something with me, right? Okay, you can see it, but I can't. Okay, let me go back.
Maybe you can stop sharing, then share it again.
Maybe. Okay, there we go. Okay. So let's talk about different ways to internally cleanse the body. So I've already mentioned ways in which to do that. So let's go through some recipes or some of those ways in which to cleanse these paths of elimination. So we talked about foods being an option. So this handout here gives us some foods that can be used when you're doing a cleanse, right? So it lists some detoxification vegetables, the cruciferous family, things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, horseradish, kale, Brussels sprouts, things of that nature. These are things that can be good for cleansing. Leafy greens such as cilantro. Cilantro is great for cleansing or detoxing the body of heavy metals, among other things. But leafy greens from the beets, from the collards, from the dandelion, spinach greens, bok choy, chard. These are things that are also really good to use to cleanse the body as well. They list some detoxifying fruits, grains, other vegetables and such. I usually suggest kind of sticking with your vegetables or some of these detoxifying fruits. I really so much wouldn't say to do the starchy vegetables, or even heavy meats while trying to do a detoxification through diet. But these are some of the options that are listed here. But certain fruits like berries, whether you're talking blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, all of these are really good for cleansing. Grapes or a grape fast is one of the common juice fasts that people use, where they'll just juice grapes or get a really natural grape juice that's already, bottled up, that you can use as your meals. It's really cleansing because of the fiber in it, kind of helps you eliminate and specifically cleanses the colon for sure. Same thing with apples. Some people do apple fast, where they're either eating apples or drinking the apple juice, preferably drinking the juice, either juicing the apples yourself or buying a good quality apple juice in a jar. Usually glass bottles are the best options for pre-bottled or pre-packaged juices, not plastic. But there are different fruits you can focus on. If you are prone to hypertension, red and black raspberries historically have been used for lowering blood pressure. So you may want to focus on those raspberries, eating them, juicing them. Other foods that are good for cleansing the liver are things like grapefruit, beet, carrots, green tea, apples, cabbage, walnuts, garlic, turmeric, avocado, lemons and limes, arugula. These are just all foods that are really good for the liver. I mentioned already cilantro being particularly good for heavy metal toxicity. Beets are excellent for the liver and for the blood. If you have skin issues, if you need to do a blood purifier for that or for other reasons, beets are great for that as well. We know that avocados give us the good healthy fats or oils that we need in the body. That works hand in hand with the liver and gallbladder, because the gallbladders focuses a lot on processing out the oils and fats from foods that we're eating. We know that turmeric, and we'll talk a little bit more about turmeric, but we know that turmeric is good for the liver, also good for the kidneys. We know that it's good for inflammation. It's good for boosting the immune system. So it has a lot of uses as well. This handout here gives just an example, and if you have the handout, you can refer back to this at your leisure. Or if you don't, you can certainly, I'll put my email here for anyone who's new that doesn't have it and doesn't have the handouts. But this is just sort of an example of a 3-day liver cleanse. So it kind of tells you what to consume morning to night, how to, drink some lime or lemon water upon rising, how to eat or what to consume for your morning, mid-morning, lunch, afternoon, and dinner foods or meals. Also, there is a juicing recipe, and this is the juicer. Certainly, I guess if you don't have a juicer and you just have a blender, this would work. Just know that it'll be very thick and pulpy. But this is a liver cleanse juice that includes beets, carrots, lemon, cucumber, and ginger. Something else also that you can just kind of have and set to the side for when you, in your leisure time, want to, develop a diet regimen or a food regimen for you that includes kind of juices or smoothies. Here is another one. This one is really good for the liver and the kidneys. We know that all the diuretic or water-rich foods are always going to be good for the kidneys because it's going to help get rid of any excess fluids in the body. So that's what diuretics do. And so certain foods are known diuretics, things like cucumbers, parsley, lemon, celery. So all of these things and more, but that's what comes to mind. And several of these are in this particular smoothie recipe. So again, this is another option for cleansing the liver and the kidneys. Back to turmeric, I said we would talk a little bit more about turmeric. So of course, turmeric you can do as just a straight turmeric tea, or in the Indian culture or Ayurvedic medicine, they have what's called golden milk, where you heat up. In India, they use a lot of goat's milk. But you can certainly use almond milk or some kind of plant-based milk, almond milk, hemp milk, oat milk, rice milk, or what have you as the base. And you add in your turmeric. You can add in a little bit of ginger and black pepper. And you pretty much cook it down and it turns into like this golden milk. And it's excellent to drink. It's a good digestive aid, a good after dinner drink. So you can do it in tea form, but you can also add it to smoothies. You can encapsulate it and take it as a supplement. But these are the benefits of it. So we know that turmeric is good for detoxing the body, boosting the immunity of the body, protecting the liver tissue, cleansing and purifying the blood, easing symptoms of coughs and colds, improving circulation. It improves the skin, and it helps prevent internal blood clotting. So just a good note on turmeric. In addition to just overall being a good supplement to use for cleansing the liver, it does all these other wonderful things. I mentioned some of these diuretics already, but yes, a good kidney cleansing recipe because of these diuretic foods here. This is a good thing to cleanse the liver. Right? So this can serve as a good detoxifier where you simply put everything in a blender, half a lemon, 4 stalks of celery, 1 cucumber, 3 sprigs of parsley with some water. Another good idea for you to include in your cleansing regimen. And then with our colon cleansing, again, colon cleansing is probably the most popular when people think of cleansing and detoxification. Usually they're talking about the colon, but it is not the only path of elimination. So all of these others are just as important, right? But colon cleansing is key. If you do not have a bowel movement every day, you are toxic. You have a problem. You need to do some sort of colon cleansing regimen. We have to go, if we eat every day, and most of us eat several times a day, right? If we eat every day, we have to eliminate every day. And if by chance you're eating 3 times or more a day, it's not absolutely necessary that you are having a bowel movement 3 times a day, but at the very least once a day, and ideally twice a day. Right? So, and it doesn't mean that you have to go to the bathroom after every meal, because of course you're not eliminating that meal. Most foods, especially if they contain meat, are going to take upwards of 12 to 24 hours to digest anyway. So of course, some people, over the years of being a healer, many people say, oh yeah, I go every day after every meal. And that's a nice way to gauge your regularity. But of course, know that you are not eliminating what you've just consumed. It takes more time to go through the digestive system. Now, also, of course, now let me say, in rare cases where you're having diarrhea or some other kind of digestive issue, if you do see sort of right away what you've just consumed, then we know that there's a problem, right? So you're suffering from diarrhea, the food is not taking enough time in the body. So if you do in fact see something that you just ate, then know that there's some issue with that, and too quickly the food has passed through your body, right? So some cleansing foods and herbs. Flax seeds, we know that this is good. It protects the intestinal flora, and all intestinal flora is the good bacteria. And we know that 50% of the bacteria in the body is housed in the colon, right? So we want it to be healthy bacteria, not disease-causing bacteria or bacteria that will create an environment for disease, you know, the bad bacteria. So it's important for that reason alone to keep the colon cleansed and free of old waste and toxins and such, because it'll turn what would normally be good, healthy flora into bad bacteria. Alfalfa is another herb that is great for the digestive tract. It's a good cleanser. Spirulina and wheatgrass, these aid in the body getting more oxygen because it's green, it has chlorophyll. This is what gives things life, right? And nutrients. So we know that if we include this in the diet, it's going to get more oxygen and help move and circulate things better so that elimination can occur in the way that it has to. Chickweed is an herb that's good for constipation. Chickweed is like a refrigerant herb. It kind of cools the body and it kind of helps, you know, kind of cleanse or gently flush or wash waste out of the body. So this is good for relieving constipation and cleansing the colon. Cascara sagrada, this is excellent for strengthening the muscle tone of the colon walls. The colon does this action called peristalsis, right? That's the movement that it makes to move waste through the colon and out the body. So Cascara sagrada kind of stimulates that sometimes, especially if it has gotten stagnant from constipation, from irregularity. If you don't go every day, then definitely that peristalsis is stalled, right? It's gotten lazy. So something like a stimulant laxative like Cascara sagrada kind of stimulates it and says, hey, wake up. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Every day you have to make movements to get waste out of this body. Cascara sagrada helps the body do that. Fennel seeds also are great for cleansing the colon. It helps with lower abdominal pains. If you have a diet that's full of gassy foods, sometimes the cruciferous family of vegetables like the broccoli and cauliflower causes excess gas for some people, right? So fennel is great as a digestive aid. It kind of helps your food digest, helps cut down the gas and things like that. So that's important because sometimes there's not solid waste that needs to be removed from the colon, but gases. So they'll have gas pockets. So sometimes you'll feel really full and bloated and you'll feel just really ill and like, oh my gosh, I just need to get rid of this stuff in my body. It'll end up just being gas. So you may not have as much solid waste that has to come out, but maybe gas. So being a good combination of foods, and we talked about food combining previously, right? But even if you're still having problems with that, something like fennel seeds are excellent for helping eliminate that gas. Aloe vera is like a mild laxative. This is really healing and soothing to the intestinal lining. And it's just soothing and healing to the whole gastrointestinal tract. And it serves as a mild laxative. So this is something excellent to have. And if some of these other ones are not available in whatever part of the world you're in, aloe vera is pretty prevalent in most parts of the world. So this is one that you could definitely access in most cases. Peppermint, this alleviates the waste and such in the intestine. So it helps with digestion. This is also a really good after dinner tea to drink, but it also aids in that whole digestive process and helps the colon evacuate itself. Mangoes is a really sweet fruit. So in some cases, I would say do it in moderation. If you're not diabetic or don't have any blood sugar issues, I mean, mangoes are definitely good for you, but not for everybody all the time. But in this instance, it is good for relieving constipation. So this can be good as a natural laxative. Probiotic yogurt, whether it's kefir or whether it's live active culture yogurt, Greek yogurt or regular yogurt that has what we call probiotics in it, or acidophilus or live active cultures. These are all words or terms you would hear and want to hear when you're choosing a yogurt to consume, because these help to restore that whole intestinal flora that I mentioned earlier when we were talking about flax seeds, right? And so this is used to put that good bacteria in the colon. And for some people, because of that, it helps the colon move itself or relieve itself. Fermented foods like kefir, unpasteurized cultured butter, and other things like that that are, again, natural probiotic sources. These are also good for cleansing the colon. And then certain good, healthy, organic fruits, if possible, or if available. Certain fruits are just good for giving a lot of fiber into the body to help move the colon. These are things like apples, grapes. Grapefruit is not on this list, but I'm gonna add that. Pineapples, papaya, kiwi, all of these are really good fruits when you're talking about cleansing the colon, okay? And since we are talking about the colon, let's talk about poop and what our poop should look like. Okay, maybe not poop, okay, bowel or stool, right? All different terms for the waste that we eliminate, right, through our colon. This chart is just a good handy chart to have, just to give indication of what your waste should look like, right? So ideally right around 5, but if you're somewhere around 4 or 5, you're doing well. We know, obviously, we do not want our waste or our stool to look like number 1, where it's very hard and lumpy like nuts. It's hard to pass, it's painful. This is definitely not what we want our stool to look like. And then, of course, in the reverse, we don't want it to be very, very liquidy, watery, with no solid pieces either. So we, of course, want to avoid those things, right? But we want to be somewhere in the middle, and that's very important because we want to make sure that the waste that's coming out looks healthy, if that makes sense. Because even though it's waste, it gives indication of the condition of the body, okay? Yeah, so no, yes, that's fine. And so, going through and making sure I'm not missing any comments or questions. All right, okay, so great, no questions. And while I'm in the chat, let me just go ahead and put my email again. If by chance you are not part of the WhatsApp group for this class, cool1@gmail.com, yes. So if you're not, or if you've not been on the call before and received the handouts, feel free to send me an email. I'll send you the handouts that I am, showing here today. And moving on, let's do a quick recap before we go into the last part, where we will talk about hypertension and diabetes a little bit. Oh, I made it upside down, right? Okay, so we talked about different ways to cleanse. Oh, no, let me go back. So we talked about the liver, we talked about the skin, we talked about the kidneys, we talked about the colon. So let me just spend a little bit of time talking about, and you know what, I didn't even spend that much on the skin either, but let's talk a little bit more about the skin and the lungs. Okay, because usually when someone has done some type of cleanse, and I'm gonna stop sharing for a second, right? Usually when people talk about some type of cleanse, we're generally talking about the colon, or we're talking about the liver or the kidneys. Most people are not going to say, oh, I'm going to do a skin detox or a skin cleanse, right? But again, as I mentioned earlier, the skin is our largest organ. It is our protective barrier, right? And while it's thin and vulnerable, right, it's very protective, right? And it houses or encloses all of our parts, right? And of course, we know underneath there's other tissues and bones and all of these things, right? However, the skin has to be given its respect. And anybody who's ever had skin issues, right, as a child or as an adult, or as we age or we go through different conditions, lupus and other things that will give or create different skin conditions, right? Alopecia or candidiasis, or there are a number of conditions that affect the skin, right? So unless you've had those issues, you may not put a lot of thought into skin health. But what I usually say is the skin is very important, and we should treat what we put on it as carefully as what we should treat what we put inside our bodies, right? Meaning, what kinds of soaps or cleansers you put on your body are very important. What types of skin creams that you put on your body, very important, right? So, you know, if you're on the continent and you have access to natural black soap that contains pawpaw and plantain skins and, you know, all of these natural ingredients, that's what I would always opt for. Not some of these body washes and things that you'll find here in the States or in the UK that'll have all of these sodium lauryl sulfates and things like that, are just really detergents that we're putting on our skin. And you know, you want it to be as clean, as natural, as residue free, you know, naturally derived. Fortunately, nowadays, you also can find a lot of soaps and cleansers that are made from different natural butters, you know, shea butter soaps and goat's milk and different oats and other grains, colloidal silver soap, and just different things. You always want to opt for some kind of natural cleansing soap to put on your skin. And then in terms of your moisturizer, and we always need to moisturize. If it's not shea butter, maybe some kind of shea butter blend or whipped shea butter, or add it to cocoa butter, or add it with mango butter or avocado butter, but some natural fatty oil that is good for the skin, that absorbs well in the skin, that's natural, is going to be your best option in terms of how to moisturize your skin. And then, of course, if you have different rashes and things like that, you may enhance it with some different herbs. As an herbalist, I've made all kinds of skin creams and products and ointments and salves and lotions and butters. There are different herbs that deal with healing the skin. So if there is old scars and marks, you may use something like comfrey in a skin cream. Or if you have a lot of cuts or sores and you need healing, echinacea and golden seal may be in a ointment or a cream that you would rub on your skin to heal your skin. So there are different things to do with the skin. In addition to that, skin brushing is a way to detox or cleanse the skin, right? So dry skin brushing is something that we often do as part of a cleansing or detox regimen, where you get a natural bristle brush, similar to what you would use in the shower, and you would do dry skin brushing. I have props today. I never have props. I'm always looking around for props, right? But so something like this, it could be like this, it could have a handle, but you would do, you know, skin brushing, right, of your entire body, across your, well, it's always towards the heart, so I'm not doing a good demonstration, but you skin and one fell swoop, not circular or anything like that, but you want to use a natural bristle brush to do dry skin brushing. That is an excellent way of detoxing your skin, right? Then let's talk about the lungs. I got 6 more minutes, right? The lungs, again, thank God we don't have to think about breathing, right? It's both a voluntary and involuntary action. And so we can breathe in deeply and we can exhale, and we're doing that to expel any poisonous gases that are in the body, okay? And so we know that deep conscious breathing or conscious breath work is important. So we may do our slow, deep breaths, or we may do something called fire breaths, right? But either way, we are stimulating our lungs. We're exercising our lungs. We're getting out any toxins from the lungs that are not serving us and that are toxic, and not allowing for good quality oxygen to be circulated in the body. So all of this is important. So we have to treat the lungs very well. Detoxifying herbs for the lungs are things like mullein, wild cherry bark, horehound. All of these are really good herbs that help to detox the lungs. But a lot of times the lungs and the skin are overlooked. So I wanted to highlight that. I wanted to highlight that. Do it again. Oh, okay. If I hit something and I take the screen off, it throws me off. Okay, so causes of colon disease. That's a big question. Oh, and that was directly to me. Maybe you don't want me to answer it out loud. There are different causes, but irregularity and poor diet is probably going to be the key. As we've discussed earlier in this series, the cause of disease are usually two things: malnutrition or toxicity. Okay, and so what we know is that if we're not getting the right nutrients and we're not eliminating properly and getting rid of toxins, usually you'll develop some kind of disorder, whether it's of the colon or otherwise. There is a WhatsApp group, and if I think earlier in the chat, if you'll scroll through and see how to join that, or if Yvonne can maybe repost that. But yes, we formulate different groups for the class, even though you're always welcome to come on and join the class. But each day, if you're in the group, you get these handouts that we kind of collectively go over at the end of the week on Saturdays during the call. Passion fruit leaves. So I have not used, because when I first read this question, Roland, I was thinking papaya leaves, because I've used that in some skincare products. I am not familiar with the leaves of the passion fruit and any particular treatment. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you with that. So I have 3 more minutes. So I don't want to spend a lot of time with talking about diabetes and hypertension, because, you know, as you know, I can't give advice per se. I'm simply giving you information, trying to educate you so you can empower yourself to be better and be more conscious of things that you can do for your health. These handouts are strictly for your information. So I gave this handout. And again, if you don't have it, feel free to email me, I'll send it to you. But there's a handout that just talks about diabetes, how to control it, what's a healthy number. And then I included this glycemic index, right? And so the glycemic index gives us foods that have some kind of starch content, right? And it tells us which foods are okay to eat that will not raise our blood sugar, right? So it's called the glycemic index. And this is really important so that you'll know which fruits are better options, which vegetables are better options, which breads or grains, rices, pastas, even candies, you know, not that we should just freely consume these things, but if we are going to consume them, we'll know which ones are lower glycemic, that will have less of an impact on the pancreas. And then the same thing with the chart on blood pressure. It's giving an indication of, oh, now I can't share the screen, but it's okay, I'm really finished. But it just gives an indication of what are healthy numbers, and if you're in a certain range, what that means. And it gives suggestions on what foods to avoid. say yes to things like apples and avocados and bananas and broccoli and oats and orange juice and things like that, and then avoid high salt foods and saturated fats and hydrogenated oils, and then including herbs like hawthorn berry, garlic, and so on and so forth. Foods like flaxseed oil and fish oils and such. So these are just tips that I wanted to let you have access to so that you would know how to stay healthy and fight off diabetes and hypertension, or even if you have those things, how to manage them. Hey, Dean King. Okay, you're not Dean King anymore. Baba Damani, thank you. To you and your wife, greetings. The main cause of pimples. Yeah, so any kind of pimple outbreak, something on the skin, you need to do, or traditionally what you should do, or what I've done in the past, because again, I can't recommend, is do a liver cleanse. A liver cleanse is going to cleanse the blood. That's going to heal the skin. Okay, so we've talked about those, or refer back to the handout on herbs and find the ones that are blood purifiers or liver cleansers, and that will help with pimples. Okay. All right, so I have set my time. I think Mr. Mapondera is coming on next. We had to alter the schedule a little bit today. So if you have any questions, email me. Thanks for joining us today. And as always, I bid you good health and peace, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nana Akua, for the good presentation. I think we learned a lot of things from you. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. Same to you all.
Yes, up next, we are going to have Mr. Mapondera. Mr. Mapondera, can you hear us?
Yes, okay, I was muted, I just unmuted myself. Well, again, thank you. It's always a pleasure meeting and talking to you on this precious day every weekend. As I mentioned last time, it's at times I'm always grappling, as to whatever I'm going to say, whether that is going to be relevant to you guys or not. But I need, again, more feedback from you. I can only share what I have experienced in my life, and hopefully you'll find it helpful as well. Today I want to talk about not being afraid to say your peace of mind and understanding the value of what you say. At times we get to a point where we think you're saying something to somebody, and at times you doubt whether you wasted your time saying something to somebody, or maybe you should have just kept quiet. It's just like, you see somebody going through a path where there are a lot of snakes there, but there are a lot of animals, that hate that person. You've got two choices, not to say, hey, don't go there, because it's a very dangerous place to go. Or you can say, I'm going to walk there with you, so that if you are attacked, both of you, you've got enough strength to defend yourselves. Or you decide to just keep quiet. Say, okay, that's his own problem, or that's her own problem. She'll find out what it is all about. If she was interested, she would have asked you, hey, is it safe to go through this path or not? But quite often, some of us don't have the opportunity to have even somebody to ask, can I do this or do that? You just have to figure it out yourself. Now, you may not be aware that there's a lot of attention being given to the African youth for two reasons. They say Africa is the largest population in the world right now. Probably 60–70% of Africa's population is between the ages of 18 and 35 or 18 and 40, which means it has got several implications. From a business point of view, 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people, – 60% of 1.4 billion people, – that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably 700 million people. 60% of 1.4 billion people, – 'that's probably That's bigger than the whole of the United States put together. The United States is only 300 million people. The whole of Europe is probably 400 million people. So it means everybody, wherever they are looking at Africa as the next big market to get into. And so there's this new scramble for Africa's minds, for Africa's youth mind, so that you are going to be subjected to all kinds of influences. Right now, one of the problems that we are facing in many parts of Africa is the issue of drugs. People getting into, sniffing benzene, petrol, marijuana, all kinds of stuff being thrown at the African youth. Okay? Now, when you go into these cities, some of the youth think, well, that's the cool thing to do, to be smoking, marijuana. Or that's a cool thing to be having all these drinks and so forth, and you just kind of forget, what life is all about. What we may not be paying attention to, where are these drugs coming from? And why are they being introduced into our communities? Okay? Now, if you are somebody, it's like now, you are someone who knows which is the right path to go. If you don't say anything to those youth or those people that are bringing in the drugs into our community, or the youth that are engaging in it, thinking that this is a cool thing to do, if you keep quiet, it means you become complicit about that. This is why, to me, the power of what you say comes into play. You can influence somebody who is on the wrong path, that no, this is the wrong path to go. Please don't go that way. Here are other alternatives. And for those who decide, well, it's their own problem and so forth. If his parents can't do it and so forth, who am I, to come in and try to advise him? But what we forget is that some of those drug users, they lose sense of whom they are. And at times, if they think you are in their way, they may harm you, which is a very common thing that is happening now. In terms of some of them, they get to the point where they are attacking their own parents because the parents are not giving them the money to go and get the drugs or go and buy the cannabis and all that and so forth. And you may be just, an individual just innocently walking by, and you don't know you're walking right into these guys who are desperate to have access to money so that they can go and get those drugs, that impair them. So what you say becomes very important. But again, as I said, right now, there is a scramble for the soul of the young Africans, because one, we are the biggest market that everyone is looking towards. Every company, they can sell 700 million cell phones in Africa. They're going to do everything that they can to make sure that they provide you with all the promotions so that you can buy their cell phones. They can come up with now, okay, what is the impact of us buying 700 million cell phones from a company outside of Africa? It means it's money that is going out of Africa, but it is also impeding our own resourcefulness to start creating our own cell phones. Okay? We worry, I can't get a job and so forth, but I'm sure amongst yourselves, you can be able to sit down and say, okay, we're going to have the Africa cell phone. 90% of the material used in making those cell phones is from Africa or can be made in Africa. But because they play with our minds, they think, no, I have to buy an iPhone, or I've got to buy whatever, all the other international brands that they are there. And they do it in such a way, that, well, if you don't have an iPhone, you don't have a phone. We can create our own phone. We have the Africa phone. And we can sell that Africa phone to 300 million of us, we don't have to worry whether somebody is going to be bringing in the cell phone from outside or whatever. Okay, so from an economic point of view, there is that scramble for the African youth. Two, there is a strong monitoring of how the African youth think. Where are you heading to? When you look at the elections that have taken place in Africa today, the majority of the people that voted were young people, which means young people are in the position where they can determine the leadership of Africa. Okay? But we don't look at ourselves as youth as being part of the process for change. We say, no, we are there to vote for somebody in power, and that's about it. But we don't see how our vote matters, to change the direction of the country. Okay? But because at times the powers that be want certain individuals to run our countries, because those individuals are going to take care of their interests and not our interests. And so what are they going to do? They're going to bring all kinds of distractions to the young people and say, okay, no, go this way, go that way, and so forth. But somebody is now making a decision that is going to affect your own life. Okay, so that is the second part on it in terms of how do they manipulate the political direction Africa is going to take in the future. This is why being part of I Love Black People, it gives us that whole Pan-Africanist attitude where you're saying, I am my brother's keeper. As long as you are African, I am there to support you. I'm there for you. And if we can all have that attitude throughout the whole of Africa, it means something that we see going to harm people in Togo, even if you're in Kenya, you're just as equally concerned as to what is happening to those youth in Togo, or somebody in Swaziland, or someone in South Africa, or whatever, and so forth. Okay? So be aware that this is one of the reasons why there's so much interest on what is going on with Africa's youth. Okay. And then thirdly, the intellectual, what we have in our brains. Okay, most Western countries have been more or less homogeneous. They have grown up within a particular social environment. They have done probably, they've exhausted everything that they could really introduce among themselves. So what do they need to do? Bring in someone from a different social perspective. And what does that do? It leads to what you call the brain drain. Okay? Where they make it, or make it ourselves, impossible that you can become a specialist doctor, but you can't operate in your own country, but you find it very easy to go and operate from New York, or you operate from, London or Bonn and so forth. There are more African doctors in the diaspora than you have in the whole of Africa. And at the same time, we are affected by all these diseases and whatever and so forth. And some of the things that could be saving us, they can't be done because the few doctors that have remained in Africa have spread so far. They cater for very large communities and populations. Okay? Now, instead of us thinking, well, I want to be a doctor so that I can save my people, quite often say, well, I want to be a doctor so that I can go and practice in New York because I understand they make so much money than I make here at home. But what we don't take into account is that there is also that deliberate move to make sure that they take our best brains to go and save them. I just gave the example of a doctor, but there are also many engineers, IT guys. I mean, like right now, I'm sure some of you must have heard of situations where, or I know for a fact, that Google, Microsoft, every IT company in USA, every telecommunication company in USA, they got a very substantial number for African youth in those fields that are working for them. Okay? But what we don't do is to have the connection, that, okay, if I'm working for Microsoft, whatever technologies that I'm helping them to develop, what impact will it have if I was doing that in Africa? Okay, we make ourselves a non-existent market or beneficiaries of the technologies that we are helping to develop in the Western world. Okay, the age at which the majority of our youth are taken or are enticed to go to Europe or to USA and so forth is the most productive time of our lives. But rather than make use of that creativity that we have for the benefit of Africa, we are busy taking it overseas. So my plea is that, we must start looking at how do we solve our own problems in Africa. We should not continue to have a situation where if you get so sick, you have to go to Dubai or go to India or whatever and so forth. Maybe the one little positive thing that came out of COVID-19 is that some of our people who relied on going overseas for medical treatment and so forth found that they could not just easily just fly and say, okay, I'm going to go to London or I'm going to go to wherever and so forth, because it would make it very difficult for to just do that. But they don't know whether they are bringing, COVID-19 or whatever and so forth. So quite a few of our leaders were now forced to start looking at our health services. Because now, if they don't get the health services, it's going to affect them. But before things change, the majority of the people are saying, well, we need better health facilities, we need better health services. Okay, so my point here is that we must take cognizance of what is being presented to us and why we are in situations that we have and what impact it is having on our communities. So you have to find ways in which you address those issues. So, but the only way, one of the ways is what communication you're going to have. The power of your words, telling your leaders, hey, we need better schools here, we need better hospitals here, we need, better communication, we need to have better environments where we can be able to make use of our intellectual resources, that is the solutions that we think we have that can solve the problems that we have should have an environment where we can be able to execute them. Okay, so that is my message for today, that let's be cognizant of the environment that we are. What are the forces that are being forced on us and why they are being forced on us? Okay, the economic side, as I mentioned, we are probably, well, I can't say we are probably, but Africa has the largest population that any business would aspire to have. If we are talking of 700 million, 800 million people, particularly youth, because when you start introducing a product to somebody who is 18 years old, that person is going to be your customer for the next 20, 30 years. I mean, what sort of insurance do you want to have for your product? Okay, even for somebody who is 40 years old, you know, they still have another pretty good 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Unless something, you know, of course, which happens in life, you know, you can get sick and die or whatever and so forth. But, you know, under normal circumstances, he's saying, okay, the guy who's 40 years old, if I can introduce him to my product, at least for the next 20 years, I'll have a very loyal customer to be selling my things to. But what it is doing is to not have us address our own problems, where we say, okay, if I'm going to start create a new gadget, which I can sell to my own people, at least those people are going to be my customers for the next 20, 30 years, rather than having them being customers of somebody else outside. The money that you make yourself, you're able to feed your family, you're able to help your relatives, you're able to send somebody to school and so forth. But when you take that money to send it out, because you're buying somebody's gadget, you're going to end up with the gadget, but the money, you have sent it out to somebody else. Okay. I say the political ramifications of our youth. Every change that you have seen happening in Africa today, the youth has been in the forefront for it. But when we have a different political agenda than the West or East, regardless of which power it is, they want to make sure that they mold us into looking at them in a more positive manner than, and then they make other people become the enemy. So there's the soul of this young African youth to make sure that they think in a way that outsiders want us to think, instead of for ourselves, for issues that affect us. So that is really my message today. If you have any questions, I've got a little bit of time for questions and so forth, and that is really what I have for you. Okay, Yvonne, I'm done. If anybody has got questions, I'll be glad to answer some. Yes, there's a Mohammed Samba somewhere.
Yes, the first question is from Roland Gassam. He's asking, how well can we set up that useless meeting with UN and AU?
What, can you go over that question again?
How well can we set up of that useless meeting with UN and AU?
How can we set up that useless meeting? I don't know, but basically what I can say, with the UN, I don't think we have got much value, in the sense that we don't have a single African country on the Security Council. The Security Council has got the veto power to say, okay, if a certain policy is going to affect an African country, that you can have an African, representative on the UN Security Council saying no, and that would stop, the UN from, or any other country from doing something there. Because of lack of that veto power, we are totally at the hands of the superpowers. Africa have got 1.4 billion people, but they've got a country like Britain with, 50, 60, 70 million people, having the power to veto decisions that affect the 1.4 billion people in Africa. The United States has 300 million people, but they've got the veto power to determine things that can affect us as an African people. But we don't have the veto power ourselves to stop things that have got an impact on Africa. As far as the AU is concerned, again, it's our institution. Okay, you can't call it a useless organization. It's our institution. That is the only institution that we have right now as an African people So it is up to us to mold that AU to do things that are relevant to us as an African people. When you get involved, maybe you can end up representing your country at the AU, or you can end up joining some of the organs of the AU, the secretariat and so forth, where with your technical skills, you can participate in some of those. If you're a doctor, you can, AU has got what they call the Center for Disease Control for Africa. Okay, you've got, young African doctors are involved there. These are the people who are evaluating, the issue of viruses or development of drugs in Africa, but, all the health issues and so forth. They are determined by those guys. Of course, they work in collaboration with WHO and so forth. Okay, so my comments that no, the AU is not a useless organization, but that's one organization that we have, that we control, but we have to play our part to make sure it addresses our needs. The UN, we don't have veto power, we're not on the Security Council. African countries, they have been saying for a very long time, we need to have a seat at the table. But because if we had that power, it means would they be attacking all the oppressors, the colonizers, the British, the French, and the Americans, and we could also influence the United Nations policies on these countries in terms of what they are doing to Africa. So they make sure they keep us out. So to me, the UN is totally not as helpful to us as African people. Any other question?
Yes, there are more questions. I think maybe we can just take them next time. But also there is one comment from Andrew Magombo from Malawi. He's saying, Mr. Maponder, your words are always insightful and eye-opening. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure. And let me take one question. I saw there was a guy, I did injustice to him. Was that Mohammed or something? Yeah, he's gone.
Yes, I think he left the meeting.
Yeah, okay. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, you have a nice, beautiful week, and we'll meet next weekend. You all take care. All right, bye-bye.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, for your time, and also for teaching us good things that will help us in our life.
Okay, that's my pleasure. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you too.
Okay, bye.
We're going to continue with Dr. Wright.
Yes, hi. Hello, everyone. Okay, so I don't have visual this time, but you will see my picture. So thank you for staying on till week 5, because I know many of you joined and witnessed the Black Blockchain Conference or Summit last week. And I gave a small presentation, although it was abbreviated. So I want to pick up where we left off. And so I'll be sharing my screen a lot since I don't have visual this time. That being said, we had several documents. And can you still hear me? Because I'm switching screens and then I'm going to be sharing.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So we had several documents that we were going to cover last week, and we'll be doing it this week to wrap up. And those were one, Amilcar Cabral, Identity and Dignity in the Context of Struggle, which, addresses a lot of things for us. Also, Haile Selassie's address to the League of Nations, and Nkrumah's The Need for a Union Government for Africa. And finally, the declaration and resolutions for the first conference of independent African states. So I'll go over those documents documents. But first, you also had a film, Cuba, an African Odyssey, where we embark on the conversation around African liberation and the liberation struggles that impacted not just Africa, but really the world. And of the most important assassinations that took place in the 20th century was that, unfortunately, of Patrice Lumumba. And Cuba, an African Odyssey, I want to say this is a film that I use in the university setting a lot to just address and cover the history. Now, we're not fixating on Cuba. It's just the title is Cuba, an African Odyssey, because it chronicles Cuba's role in the various ongoing struggles for liberation, all the way up to the end of, or at least the political end of, South African apartheid. But it covers a lot of the leadership I think could be useful in understanding some of our contemporary issues that continue under neocolonialism. And it's a good tool to look at how ideological development is relevant, meaning I love what Mr. Maframpera was saying, which is that, you know, sure, we can participate in these bodies, but if you are not developed ideologically, meaning know what you're there for, know who it is you seek to serve, and know how to serve, then sometimes our presence can be useless in these spaces. So no doubt we have Black people, African people in certain places and even positions of power within institutions. But do they serve our own everywhere we are? Our ongoing dilemma, which is our posture when we are in those spaces and places of power, the courage, the ideological development to address issues that face African people, Black people, and impact African people and Black people. So I'm going to start with just the first couple of minutes of Cuba, an African Odyssey, to just frame this conversation around liberation, and starting with the Congo specifically and Patrice Lumumba's story. It's critical because this is the thing. What happens in the Congo is so significant. Patrice Lumumba actually came into power and was in a position to impact African people, specifically in the Congo. But the Congo is a very important and strategic place in the world. And, you know, literally right down to the technology we're utilizing today, some of those very resources come out of the Congo. And so, you know, I think I mentioned this before, very often we think, you know, our task is just to struggle against our opposers, our oppressors. But in many ways, our true struggle is our struggle for unity. And our unity will provide all of the protection and insulation we need from a very hostile world. Yes, Black unity, African unity is in direct opposition to European, Western domination, okay? And so while we think no one has stakes in our unity, the truth is that our unity, they have great stakes in inciting disunity amongst us, okay? Because the West and Europe knows that our unity means that they have to renegotiate their position in world with regard to resources and ultimately power. Okay. And so Patrice Lumumba was in a critical position where he could determine who would have access to the resources that are in the Congo. And the West did not want to see unification of the Congo itself, a vast country, but still one country, because it would not serve the interest of the West in the sense that it would not be exploitable by the West if it was unified. Okay. So there are people, or there are entities in the world that take a great interest in disrupting our unity and disrupting our ability to effectively serve the interests of African people. We must know that. And unfortunately, in those moments where people are in position, sometimes they lack the courage to actually do what is good for us collectively, right? And that doesn't just happen by inspiration. We can't just pray ourselves into those positions. We have to develop ourselves and understand why we're doing what we're doing and who what we do serves. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, I hope the sound works and everything, but let me just make sure. Let's close a couple of things. So I'm gonna go to Cuba and African Odyssey, as I stated, and just share that with you for those of you who may not have watched it, or those of you who are viewing from another platform. Okay. Thank you for those who said welcome. Thank you, Andrew, Roland. Yes, I see the issues. I'm looking at the chat really quickly. Okay, but I'm gonna get to some of those questions. Hopefully I'm efficient with time this time around, so. Okay. Okay.
91 in Havana. It is now.
Let me know if you hear the audio as footage. Yvonne, can you all hear this? Yvonne?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
July 1991 in Havana. It is Nelson Mandela's first trip outside Africa since his release from 27 years of prison. But why would the legend of struggle against oppression decide that the first person he wants to thank for helping to end apartheid is Fidel Castro, the very man who is regarded in the West as an oppressor of his own people? Fidel Castro and 500,000 Cubans took part in the African wars, which ultimately ended colonialism. This little-known story began in 1960, only a year after Cuban revolutionaries triumphed. The struggle had captured people's imagination, and the young feisty leaders, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, emerged from 3 years of guerrilla war as heroes. The wave of independence in Africa was spreading like wildfire. That year alone, 17 African countries gained independence, and 30 others started their revolutionary armed struggle. African revolutionaries were looking to the Cubans as a model for their own independence. Cuba was living proof that David could beat Goliath.
Esta gran humanidad ha dicho basta y ha echado a andar, y su marcha de gigantes ya no se detendrá hasta conquistar la verdadera independencia. Quería referirme específicamente al doloroso caso del Congo, único en la historia del mundo moderno, que muestra cómo se puede burlar con la más absoluta impunidad, con el cinismo más insolente, el derecho de los pueblos.
Che Guevara was revolted, and his speech gave a clear signal that Cuba intended to act. The case of Patrice Lumumba in the Congo was symbolic of how African independence would be crushed by Cold War strategic interests. It was Lumumba's assassination that sparked a new era for many African revolutionaries, and with it started the epic of Cuba and Africa. The Congo, one of the largest and richest countries on the continent. The Belgian colony was demanding immediate independence. Patrice Lumumba, the young articulate clerk, led the movement that negotiated a peaceful solution to end Belgian rule. On June 30th, 1960, King Baudouin arrived in Leopoldville, the capital named after his great uncle, to hand over power.
Le roi Baudouin était dans une voiture découverte. Il saluait la foule, etc. Un Congolais s'est précipité sur la voiture. J'ai vu les gardes du roi dégainer. Et tout le monde avait peur, se disait il va tuer le roi. Non, il a simplement sorti l'épée du roi de sa gaine. Et il s'est mis à danser avec cette épée. C'est très symbolique ça. C'est comme s'il lui a arraché le pouvoir.
On Independence Day, all the dignitaries assembled in Parliament. King Baudouin was to announce the transfer of power to the new government. Patrice Lumumba had just been elected Prime Minister. But the euphoria of independence did not last long. That same day, Lumumba lit a fire that spread through the entire continent.
L'indépendance du Congo constitue l'aboutissement de l'œuvre conçue par le génie du roi Léopold II.
Le discours du roi Baudouin, qui nous rappelait comment la Belgique nous a sortis de l'esclavage, comment ils ont lutté pour nous sortir des maladies du sommeil et patati patata. Ça a été un choc. Nous ne nous attendions pas à ce rappel malheureux parce que nous estimions que le roi Baudouin n'avait plus de leçons à nous faire ce jour-là.
À ce moment-là, Lumumba se lève, qui n'était pas programmé comme devant parler à ce moment-là. Il se lève et il parle. Il fait un discours très militant.
Combattants de l'indépendance, aujourd'hui victorieux, je vous salue au nom du gouvernement congolais. Nous avons connu les ironies, les insultes, les coups que nous devions subir matin, midi et soir, parce que nous étions des nègres.
Rappelez-vous comment on traitait le blanc par rapport au noir. Rappelez-vous dans les écoles quelle place nous occupions. Rappelez-vous tout l'apartheid. Alors évidemment, réaction immédiate de toute la délégation belge. D'abord, beaucoup d'agitation pendant que Lumumba parle.
Qui oubliera enfin les fusillades où périt tant de nos frères, ceux qui ne voulaient plus se soumettre au régime d'injustice, d'oppression et d'exploitation.
C'était mal reçu par les Belges, mais nous avons tout à fait répondu à nos aspirations.
Et au moment du dîner, on demande à Lumumba de présenter des excuses. Il ne s'en fait pas. Il présente les excuses en disant « Je pensais que je devais dire un certain nombre de choses, je les ai dites, donc si ça blessé, je m'en excuse et je demande qu'on tourne la page et que nous puissions voir les choses autrement. » Mais il était trop tard. La majesté était lésée. Et la majesté lésée a décidé le soir même de se venger et tout a commencé.
Lumumba wanted to govern independently, but there were only 30 university graduates in the Congo, so it was agreed that for the next 5 years, Belgium would continue to run the important departments of the new state, including the army. The soldiers felt excluded from the newly acquired freedom. Within days, they started a mutiny, which led to the breakdown of the entire country.
The troops were roaming the streets, all armed, and
Let me
it was
pause
quite
for a
a
second. So just so everyone is following, we see the transfer of power in the Congo. The Belgian king wants to pretend that this was a vision of Belgian leadership, and it was not. It was pressed and forced by the Congolese people, and it was a production of their vision for themselves, independence and freedom from the Belgians, who had at least almost 100 years had been in the Congo and ruling the Congo, starting with King Leopold, who was bizarrely deemed the sole owner of the vast African territory that is the Congo. And then it continued on with him and his descendants, and then ultimately Belgium itself exploiting and controlling, colonizing the Congo. Some, of course, Belgians and French even lived there in the Congo. That being said, what you've seen already is that Patrice Lumumba, during this December transfer of power, decides to speak to the Congolese people. He was not scheduled to speak. They had omitted him. However, he refers to the Congolese people as his comrades. And you can probably look up the full speech, but it's, the December 12th speech, where he essentially says that we endured the brutality of Belgian rule for too long, and that this day, our independence is a production of the Congolese people, my comrades, who have been in struggle continuously for this. And so the Belgians felt like, or the Belgian king felt like, it was an affront to them. The irony, the audacity of white supremacy, but they took offense to that. All parties are aware that the Congo holds some of the most important resources, not just in Africa, but in the world. And then and now, whoever controls the Congo and its 9 surrounding countries, and so if you are in the Congo or any of the 9 surrounding countries, you are in the heart of the world in terms of power and resources. And the West has every interest in controlling that part in of the world, right? I think on a couple of my sessions, I said, Africa has the youngest population on Earth right now. Africa has a bulk of the world's resources concentrated on the Congo and the 9 surrounding countries. Sure, I will have someone who says, but the resources are on the equator. Yes, the world's resources are on the equator with a concentration in the Congo and the 9 surrounding countries, which are also on the equator. So the heart of the world in terms of sustainable resources. And then, of course, we know that we are, in fact, human and a human resource, as well as we are a great source of intellectual property, right? So we produce a lot intellectually that much of the rest of the world benefits from, and we are the last, if ever, ones to benefit from that. So the Congo is in chaos at this moment in the film, primarily because of the fact that Belgian rule is sort of going to be a shadow over their heads And the people do want total liberation. There's a mutiny in the military because they are still under Belgian rule, although there is this idea and formal transfer of political power, right? And what African people, Black people want is total independence and liberation, okay? So.
Racial problem. The mutineers were there, and they had matiti, that's, bushes on their helmet, which was a sign that they were prepared for action, for combat. And I can remember one yelling, "Venez, venez, sale flamand." We were all dirty Flemish. That was some expression that meant you were really bad, and we're going to kill you. More and more stories circulated about killing, rape, pillage, etc. It was, if you will, the Iraq of today.
Le 10 juillet, retenez bien la date, les militaires belges ont occupé l'aéroport de Njili. Ils ont organisé l'agression du Congo en disant, puisque les militaires congolais mutinés se sont attaqués aux femmes, aux enfants et aux officiers, la Belgique n'avait plus aucun autre moyen de protéger ses ressortissants que de faire venir des troupes belges le 10 juillet. 10 jours après.
Lumumba immediately turned to the US for support. The United States had never been a colonizing power, and their democratic principles seemed to guarantee support for people fighting for independence. Fidel Castro himself had chosen the US as his first stop for support when his revolution triumphed a year earlier. But like Castro, Lumumba's attitude did not go down well with the Americans.
I was in the lobby of the embassy when this little
Let me
Congolese
just
clerk
say
came in, and
this.
he
I
said,
don't endorse anything this individual is saying. It's just an account. Take what you will from it, but this is not our focus, right? Why we're just going to forge through is because he's going to give some insight into the fact that although they stated that the United States was never a colonizing power within Africa, the truth of the matter is that the United States always, in some way or another, benefited from the activity in the Congo as a Western nation, and definitely, as you will see, have serious strategic interests, specifically because of cobalt and coltan, the resources that come out of the Congo that allowed them to produce military artillery and even to have nuclear capabilities, okay? And so, as you guys may know, at this period in the early 60s, there's something called the Cold War going on between Russia, the Eastern Bloc, and the United States, which is considered the Western Bloc. So although the US is not a colonizer, overt colonizer of Africa, it has interest, and it certainly understands the strategic value of places like the Congo and its resources, and is dependent militarily and otherwise on the resources that come out of Africa. And so it is going to, the United States being it, is going to try to control the politics as it plays out on the world stage, so that these resources do not end up in the hands of the Eastern Bloc, Russia, during this period. And so this is a perfect example of how I refer to the fact that while we think no one is invested in our unity, right, but us, the truth of the matter is that in context of the world, there are many people who are unseen opposers of our unity, because for us to be unified means that they go without their interests being met. And I think hopefully we're approaching a time in the world where, so what? African people, Black peoples interests and needs have gone unmet for so long that we have to put our unity at the top of the list, okay? And everybody else's desires, wants, and interests at the bottom, right? When it comes to Africa and African people, okay? So in other words, we want to get to a place in the world where we meet our needs first. And resources, human and material and otherwise, that come out of Africa meet the needs of African people, Black people first, and everybody else second. Okay, so but this man right here, he's a U.S. operative for the CIA in the Congo, and he explains how the assassination of Patrice Lumumba actually plays out.
He wanted 24 visas. He didn't know what a visa was. I said, well, do you have passports to put the visas in? No, patron, he didn't. So I explained to him what a visa was. And I said, why do you need 24? Well, he said, Lumumba is going to the States to see President Eisenhower. I said, oh, that's interesting. Told the ambassador, he said, I'm not aware of it. So he checked, and Eisenhower said, well, if he comes, I'll be here.
Monsieur le secrétaire d'État, c'est avec un réel plaisir que je me trouve aujourd'hui aux États-Unis, pays de démocratie et de liberté, pour prendre contact avec vous.
Lumumba couldn't have made a worse impression on the Secretary of State and his deputy and other people with whom he met there. He threatened, he asked for things, including to have a woman sent around to his room.
The visit was not a success, and it was clear that Washington would not come to his rescue. Just as Lumumba was leaving Washington, Cuba announced the nationalization of U.S. companies, and a trade embargo was immediately imposed on the island. Lumumba, like Castro, soon discovered that the Soviet Union was more than happy to help where the U.S. would not.
À ce moment-là, Lumumba commet probablement la deuxième erreur. Ils prennent la décision, ils font un télégramme adressé à Khrouchtchev pour lui demander l'envoi des troupes de l'Union soviétique pour venir chasser les Belges. Ce télégramme, avant même qu'il ne sorte, est volé au secrétaire de Lumumba par son ancien directeur de cabinet qui s'appelait Kandolo Damien. Larry Devlin s'accapare du télégramme, les transmet au gouvernement américain.
We became aware of it almost immediately, and it came from Congolese sources. That immediately alerted the Americans. I became wide-eyed at that. I said, we have a problem here. He tried to play off the West against the East. It's an old game, but it was relatively new at that time in Africa.
Mais Larry Devlin ne l'a pas pris comme ça. Il l'a pris pour dire, voilà, la preuve est là, que le Lumumba est communiste par conséquent. Outre le fait qu'il a insulté le roi des Belges, il est communiste, donc il faut le chasser du pouvoir.
The Congo crisis was becoming more than just a local conflict in faraway Africa. The superpowers were taking a particular interest, especially Moscow, that had recently set up a bureau for aiding anti-colonial liberation movements.
The Soviet Union was eager to help, or at least agreed to help, the legally elected Congolese government. That was in the last days of July, when a squadron of our Ilyushin 14 transport planes, about 10 left for Leopoldville. By the way, they landed in Athens, at the airport which was partly NATO base. It became a big noise. The whole noise about the Cold War started when we landed there.
It was the first time that there'd ever been Soviets in that part of Africa, at least, certainly not in the Congo, and very few in the rest of Africa, because the colonial powers were not desirous of having the Soviets there.
Третий мир в этой войне был полем, так сказать, для охоты. Перевели вам? Полем для охоты. Почему? В Европе границы были забетонированы. Перейти границу означало начать атомную войну, которую никто не хотел. А третий мир, он был как будто без хозяина. Там была возможна свободная охота. Там можно было приобретать влияние.
We believed, and I think it's true, that it was an attempt to hold Congo as a base, especially as a base of minerals for the United States, for the West. We should not forget that the first atomic bomb was done of those uranium found in Congo.
There were only two countries in the world that supplied cobalt at that time, Soviet Union and the Congo. And cobalt is extremely important for jet engines and all sorts of high technology. And we could not get it from the Soviet Union because it was a security commodity. So Congo was our only source.
I suspect that the people in Washington began wondering, where are we going to get our cobalt from if the Soviets managed to control that?
The United States deplores the unilateral action of the Soviet Union in supplying aircraft and other equipment for military purposes to the Congo. The Soviet action, which seems to be motivated entirely by the Soviet Union's political designs in Africa. I must repeat that the United States takes a most serious view of this action by the Soviet Union.
Eisenhower fumed about aggressive Soviet support for his opponents. Soviet military aid for Lumumba arrived in the Congo only 1 month after the first Soviet arms shipment had landed in Cuba. To make matters worse, Castro openly declared that he intended to use these weapons to export his revolution. Eisenhower decided to send the CIA into action.
I received a message saying that people in Washington were highly concerned about the activities of the prime minister, and that they hoped that he would go, there would be a change in the government. The next thing I knew, I received a cable saying that someone by the name of Joe would arrive in Leopoldville, and I was to take my instructions from him. And the instructions were that I was to remove him physically from, in other words, assassinate Lumumba. I asked first, whose instructions are these? And he said, they've come from President Eisenhower. The president wanted this done, and I was to put together these poisons and bring them out to you. One of the poisons was a tube of toothpaste that had poison in it, so that if he'd brushed his teeth with it, that was been the end of the man. All of these things I put in my safe because I didn't want them lying around the office. If somebody may say, may I use your toothpaste? I felt that I had some pretty good operations going, and in the long term, my operations would achieve the objective of removing Lumumba from office, but not killing him.
The Congo plunged into utter chaos. In the confusion, two separate secession movements broke away from Lumumba's government. The country desperately needed to be brought under control.
The United States started to worry about it because the Soviets were backing Lumumba. So President Eisenhower said, well, we may have to use NATO there to keep the Soviets out. But finally, cooler heads prevailed, and they asked the UN Security Council to send a peacekeeping operation to the Congo. President Eisenhower made some very basic policies which are still in existence today. And he said that if there are troubles in Africa, we don't want to have to send troops there, or Europeans should not send troops. It should all be done by the UN.
Lumumba thought that the arrival of the UN peacekeepers would help him bring stability. He was wrong. The UN mission provided the missing ingredient to oust his government.
Just a note on the UN, right? Because there was a question during Mr. Mafindera's portion of our session where someone asked about the UN. So the UN was strategically used to destabilize the Congo and open the door for the military coup that would follow and cause and be at the helm of the assassination of Patrice Lumumba.
Lumumba had just promoted his personal secretary, Joseph Mobutu, to Army Chief of Staff. Mobutu was to coordinate with the UN troops to stop the country's descent into anarchy. Instead, he turned to Larry Devlin.
Mobutu said that the army was very unhappy with the prime minister because he was turning the army over to the Soviets. He wanted to mount a coup d'etat, but there was one condition. They had to know that they would have the support of the United States government. I had tried and failed to achieve by legal means what they wanted, the United States government wanted. So I stood up and shook his hand. Finally, it took me a while to do this, and said, I guarantee you the support of the United States government. And the coup, he said the coup will take place within a week, and it did.
UN troops were supposed to protect the independence of Congo, but they would not allow the Congolese troops, which were loyal to Lumumba, to operate. The mission of the United Nations troops was misused to topple the regime of the government of Lumumba, or at least not to protect Lumumba.
Les troupes des Nations Unies ici vont encercler la résidence du Premier ministre. Sans aucun mandat, sans aucune autorisation, il y a une crise interne, les Nations Unies s'interposent et vont mettre le Premier ministre en résidence surveillée.
Lumumba's supporters organized his escape. He was sneaked out of his house, bundled up in the back of a government car.
Le bruit s'est répandu, Lumumba était parti de chez lui, on a commencé à le chercher. Mobutu a demandé aux Nations Unies de lui donner des hélicoptères, on l'a poursuivi, on l'a arrêté, on les a mis dans un hélicoptère, on l'a ramené ici ligoté comme un vulgaire bandit.
On Mobutu's orders, Patrice Lumumba was sent to his death. It was barely 6 months since Congo celebrated independence.
C'était terrible. Vous enlevez celui qui est le flambeau, l'icône, tout d'un coup, comme ça, et d'une façon très barbare, en utilisant les mains africaines. Alors c'était frustrant, c'était écœurant, c'était un appel à l'insurrection populaire. Il faut venger cela. Ce pays est à nous et je vais me battre pour lui. C'était l'étincelle qui m'a fait conduire sur le chemin du maquis, de la guérilla.
A witch hunt tracking down Lumumba's followers started in the capital. One by one, the Lumumbas fled to the safe haven across the river in Brazzaville. They organized themselves into an armed rebellion led by the 23-year-old Laurent Kabila. Lumumba's assassination resonated throughout the world. The shock was felt clearly in Cuba, where a large percentage of the population traces its origins back to the Congo. Cuba's younger revolutionary leaders were appalled. The island declared a 3-day official mourning in honor of Lumumba's memory.
Bajo la bandera de las Naciones Unidas en el Congo fue asesinado Lumumba. Y esas eran las Naciones Unidas que pretendían los norteamericanos que vinieran a inspeccionar nuestro territorio. Esas mismas Naciones Unidas.
Cuba shared Africa's revolutionary quest for real independence. What happened to Lumumba could happen anywhere if no action was taken. Fidel Castro decided that Cuba could not stand by idly. So Che Guevara went on a 2-month tour of Africa to assess how they could help local liberation movements.
Nous sommes en train de construire le socialisme sur notre terre et mettons notre petit grain de sable au service de la grande aspiration de l'humanité.
Che's public appearances hid the true objective of his mission. Cuba's future involvement in Africa was formulated at late-night secret meetings with armed liberation movements from different parts of the continent. But Che's hopes were pinned on the Lumumbist rebellion because Kabila and his men had already captured 2/3 of the Congo's territory.
Je suis contacté par l'ambassade de Cuba qu'il y a une haute personnalité cubaine qui vient d'arriver, qui aurait bien voulu avoir contact avec nous pour
Okay, so I'm going
s'entretenir
to end
avec le
there
leader.
and just delineate some things. One, so you get the picture that the liberation of the Congo was undermined, and essentially what happened, to make it understandable for everyone in very succinct terms, what ended up happening is that the Congo went from Belgian colonialism to what they thought was going to be independence, but instead moved to international colonialism. So if you had a picture in mind, you can picture one white hand being in the heart of Africa, Congo, taking the resources under Belgian colonialism. But what this move on the part of the United States and other Western nations, because they certainly were in the play, the British, the French, all of that, the Belgians still. Now the Congo was exploited by international colonialism, okay? Where many Western hands now have their hand in the Congo. There are several Western nations, European and Western nations, the United States in particular, have their hands in the Congo, controlling the politics and therefore controlling the resources. And African independence in the Congo, Black independence in the Congo is derailed and undermined, okay? By, yes, an African co-conspirator, Mobutu Sese Seko, right? Nonetheless, nobody can do much to us unless there are co-conspirators. That's, and that's not specific to us, okay? Let's be clear. Even in Europe, during the Holocaust, there were co-conspirators because the Nazis could not get close to the people in that way. The people would not follow Nazis like that, meaning Jewish people. So the people who made their own people vulnerable were co-conspirators, right? Nobody can come into my house and just take what they want. Someone in my house has to let them in. And this is not unique to us. And we shouldn't make it, because sometimes people try to vilify us African people by saying, hey, so-and-so was a co-conspirator, so you deserve that. But there'll be a European and Western example of that, and they'll never make reference to it. This is nothing new. It is an old strategy in the world. And we're not going to make it a particular characteristic of African people. There is always going to be someone who is willing to undermine the collective interest and well-being of the people. However, we've got to be on code, and that's why we've got to be on code even more, right? And be developed ideologically, and know when to note that, and know when to identify that, and know how to identify that. That ultimately, although this person looks like me, although this person is Black like me, although this person has the same ethnicity as I do, they are not serving the interests of the people, which for this course, we're always focused on the measurable results, the production, the substance of things. What did it result in? What did it produce for us, right? And ultimately, Patrice Lumumba intended to deliver independence, but total independence of the Congo to the Congolese people. And Mobutu Sese Seko was willing to undermine the liberation and unity of the Congo because of the internal geopolitical issues, and give the West, the United States, and Western nations that were in collusion with that via the UN, let's be very clear, via the United Nations, a opportunity to steal that away from African people, from Black people. But let me give you another contrasting example. One of our readings is by Amilcar Cabral. And Amilcar Cabral was at the time a young revolutionary who was organizing the people in a very small nation called, West African nation called Guinea-Bissau. And what many people don't understand about Africa in particular, and therefore the rest of the world, as we, are spread and scattered throughout the world, is that we are not homogeneous, okay? Prior to the advent of colonialism and the invasion and disruption of Westerners and Europeans in Africa, we were not homogeneous then, and we are not homogeneous now, meaning we are not all the same, like a cookie cutter, right? We're not exactly the same. We are the oldest people on earth. We have the oldest relationships, both good and bad. And we have the world's diversity, meaning the diversity of the world is reflected first in the diversity of African people on the continent. And it is responsible for the production of diversity of cultures and people in the world, okay? And so the advent of colonialism, imperialism in Africa poses a common problem. And for the time in our history as human beings on the continent, we are posed with common oppressors, a common interest in bringing a system like colonialism and imperialism in Africa to an end. But prior to that, we had no reason to be homogeneous, okay? And so what Amilcar Cabral deals with is the reality of African people, Black people, as we are faced with colonialism and the struggle against it to defeat it and take back the territories, which are now colonial nations, right? These borders that are on the African continent are not borders that we created, right? They divide some of the same people and force some together with people who they are very different from, okay? That's a perfect, Senegal and Gambia are a perfect example. Two different countries, one colonized by the French, the other colonized by the British. However, the Senegambian area, many cultures are shared throughout a large dominant group, the Wolof. It has divided us, right? So it has forced us, and that's another example could be Nigeria and Nigeria in general, right? How Nigeria, the borders are cut, forcing together people who were never the same to begin with, okay? And asserting that they are now one nation, okay, for the first time. But who's doing this? People who are external and not from any of the cultures on the ground in Africa, right? So Westerners, Europeans, and this is the impact of white supremacy and culture. So Emil Cabral argues that in the process of our struggle, we will forge unity. So this collective opposer, this collective oppressor, this collective dilemma of colonialism and domination by Europeans. And in Guinea-Bissau, it is the Portuguese who are the first to come down to the coast of Africa and try to penetrate Africa, and actually make their way to the Congo as well, okay, early in the 1600s, in the 17th century. That being said, Amilcar Cabral is working on the ground to bring the many ethnicities of Guinea-Bissau together in order for the men and women of Guinea-Bissau to engage in a struggle for the nation. You very often hear it is referred to Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, okay? And this is the brief story of that. The concept I'm trying to advance here is this: we can all be different in ethnicity, language, and even culture. However, I do support the opinion and the theory of Cheikh Anta Diop, the great Senegalese historian and scientist who wrote a book on the cultural unity of Black Africa, meaning that we do have a common thread that runs throughout our cultures and various ethnicities on the continent. So we have a common thread in addition to having a great deal of diversity, right? In culture, language, and so on and so forth. That being the case, forced into these colonial paradigms, in Guinea-Bissau, Amilcar Cabral recognizes this and says, this struggle of our people against the Portuguese is going to be an act of unification for us, right? This is where we forge our relationships with each other as we struggle against a common oppressor, okay? So in other words, we are about to undergo something, go through something together that is in our common interests. And for the first time, we will be unified. We will not become the same, right? We will still be ethnically diverse, but we will forge ourselves a new nation of people as a result of our collective struggle. So his specific words was that the struggle will prepare the people for the victory of leading their own nation as a result of their struggle. Okay, and they do have victory over the Portuguese. As it relates to Cuba, Cuba is giving support, but Amilcar Cabral takes the position that sure, Cubans, Fidel Castro can lend strategic support, can lend resources, military resources, and even human resources. However, only the people of Guinea-Bissau will be the ones to engage in armed struggle for the liberation of this nation. This is a process we must undergo. And, you know, famously, the struggle of Guinea-Bissau, which is one of the few West African nations that actually engaged in armed struggle and guerrilla warfare, had a struggle that was very unique in the sense that men and women were armed in that struggle and engaged in armed struggle. Okay. Men and women, the regular men and women of Guinea-Bissau, African men and women, were armed and fighting their struggle. And Amilcar Cabral did not allow Cubans to take up arms. They could lend support on the ground, but they would not fight the war for the people of Guinea-Bissau under the leadership of Amilcar Cabral. This is kind of speaks to the point that I make in the context of our seminar, which is that us forging unity comes through, struggling with each other around notions of our differences. It is okay to acknowledge our differences. I mean, every cycle that I teach this course, there are always a lot of questions about ethnic differences and conflicts on the ground in Africa. And please don't be surprised that even in the diaspora, we struggle with each other around ethnic differences out here too, meaning Africans in the United States and Africans from the Caribbean, Africans in Central and South America. We are ethnically, we have become our own ethnicities out here, and we are ethnically different, and we speak different languages. However, we have a common interest, and we have to understand when our common interest in defeating our oppressors and forging unity, and we only can defeat our oppressors by forging unity, right? Because unity actually is the solution, right? Unity gives us all that we need, meaning that it allows us to protect and insulate ourselves. So I always get questions here, there, and everywhere with regard to ethnic differences, cultural differences on the ground in Africa. How do we work? Well, this is the thing. We spend a lot of our time proving to other people who are not Black people, who are not African people, that we can do work for them efficiently, that we can perform effectively and to their interests. And we spend zero time struggling with each other, addressing and attacking the issue of unity. The fact that our common threat is so profound that it is only in our best interest to become unified. That's the only thing that's in our best interest. Proving to white people or European people that you can perform as good as them in their schools and this and that and the other, and we're not the stereotypes, that doesn't get us anywhere, okay? Because they're still going to function the way they do, because their issue is not that they believe those things about us. Their issue is that they're going to exploit us on a material level and on a human level, okay, to their benefits. In other words, we must suffer in order for them to thrive. And that is really in a very explicit way, really the design of white supremacy and culture, okay? They cannot thrive without exploiting us everywhere we are, because they don't have the resources, material and otherwise, okay? So they've got to destabilize us. They've got to cause disunity amongst us. They've got to interrupt us. They've got to destroy us. They've got to rob and steal from us in order to thrive. And so we've got to understand that, yes, talk to your brother, talk to your sister about the common aspects of your struggle, and how much does your ethnic difference matter in the face of oppression, your common oppression. It matters not. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter in your world and in the real serious assessment of things. Okay. However, when you face a common oppressor that seeks to suck the life out of you and your homeland, then you need to understand that that is what has to be paid attention to. Okay. And us coming together is in our best interest. One of the things, and I'm going to stop and let this continue. One of the things that capitalism in particular and white supremacy has taught us to do and do too well. It has taught us how to work against our own best interest. It has taught us to work against our own best interest in every aspect. Okay? And ultimately, working against our own best interest doesn't and has never worked for us. Okay? It satisfies immediate gratification on many levels, but in the bigger picture, it undermines us all. Okay, so, you know, Amilcar Cabral is a special case because he also is the person that when engaging Marxist-Leninist Eastern Bloc ideologies, right, which comes up a lot in the context of Africa and its liberation struggles, he is the one to point out that no, we are not Eastern Europeans. We must invoke our culture. We must invoke our history as a liberatory process, okay? Because colonization erased our culture, colonization destroyed our history and collective and national memory of our history and the right to recall that history. And so no, our liberatory process can't be like Eastern Europeans and so extreme in terms of Marxist and Leninism that we say history and culture don't matter. They do matter. And we can use these things as weapons in our struggle for liberation. Okay? And so we do have to conjure history. Let me just give you a real brief example. What would happen in the Congo after Patrice Lumumba is assassinated and Mobutu Sese Seko is in the leadership position? He forbids the story, the history of the Congo's liberation under Patrice Lumumba to be told. See, erasure of the history. For many, many years, people could not speak or openly write about the story of Patrice Lumumba and the struggle for liberation there. He erased it, Mobutu. And look at Mobutu as just you would look at any puppet of the West. He knows that in order to conquer a people, you have to erase their common and collective history. You have to destroy their culture and force them into the opposer's culture, the oppressor's culture, or the colonial culture. You have to teach them to go against their own best interests. And so years ago, long before, well, I was teaching, but I was not teaching on university level. When I was still a graduate student, I actually worked at the Museum of African Art, and it had an exhibit called Patrice Lumumba in Urban Art. And it was a whole exhibit of paintings that told the story of Patrice Lumumba from the time of the speech that he gave, the December 12th speech, to the time of his assassination and what his objectives were. And the reason why this exhibit emerged is because during this period of Mobutu's leadership and reign, it was forbidden to speak and or write about Patrice Lumumba and the liberation of the Congo. So people painted it. It manifested in the art so that the story would not die, so that they could continue to tell their history of liberation and it would not be erased by the Mobutu regime or the Western invasion of the Congo. All right. So you see how they were fearful of this story inspiring future generations. And so erasure of history is usually a way to oppress people, to erase their memory of who they are. And this is why we conjure our history. Okay, this is precisely why we conjure it, because it is a weapon. It is a tool of liberation. Okay.
For Fidel, this was a good opportunity to assess the qualities of the revolutionaries he wanted to support. It was undoubtedly Amilcar Cabral who stole the limelight. Cabral, only 31 years old, was leading a fierce struggle against the Portuguese Empire in one of Africa's smallest and poorest nations, Guinea-Bissau.
Esta conferencia, aquí en Cuba, territorio libre de América, y primer país socialista en el hemisferio occidental, es en realidad una grande promesa, una grande esperanza para todos los pueblos que luchan contra el imperialismo.
Pero ya había un antecedente de América cuando se había entrevistado en el recorrido que hace el Che por distintos países, que llega a Conakry y tiene la oportunidad de hablar con América. Y el Che dice que uno de los movimientos de liberación más serios que hay en ese momento y de más posibilidad en ese momento es el movimiento de la liberación de la colonia de Guinea-Bissau y Cabo Verde.
Après les grands discours de Fidel Castro, Amilcar Cabral fait un discours remarquable. Il a caractérisé, je m'appelle ça, très bien la situation en Afrique à partir de son propre pays, en parlant des ethnies, en parlant d'états de pauvreté, d'exploitation, pour justifier l'idée de continuer la lutte armée, c'est parce qu'il n'y avait pas autre voie, parce que les grandes puissances s'opposaient à l'indépendance des colonies portugaises, par exemple.
For years, Amilcar's struggle was not of much consequence. But when the guerrillas started capturing territory, suddenly the importance of this neglected colony became evident. For Portugal, much more was at stake in Guinea-Bissau. This tiny colony could prove to be the empire's Achilles heel.
Y se liberaba Guinea-Bissau, y así se demostró después. Se desprendía la liberación del resto de los países de habla portuguesa que colonizados. Entonces, allí estaba el eslabón más flojo que tenían de la cadena, desde el punto de vista de los portugueses. No podían permitir, tuvieron hasta que hicieron todo el esfuerzo para no permitir que se desgajara ninguna de las colonias, y mucho menos Guinea, que iba a ser el ejemplo del resto de las colonias para su liberación.
Il n'avait pas beaucoup de richesses. À ce moment-là, la Guinée devait recevoir de l'argent du Portugal. C'était un pays où on faisait l'agriculture, pas plus. L'agriculture arriérée, on faisait la Guinée. Hein? Et tandis que ce n'était pas le cas en Angola, où il y avait des immigrés, qui étaient des commerçants, des hommes d'affaires. C'était des richesses de l'Angola et de Mozambique qu'ils voyaient, parce que Guinée n'ont rien fait.
The Portuguese were aware of their weakness, but they held a trump card. The government leased a strip of land on the Azores Islands to the US Defense Department. That airbase was used to protect American allies in the East, like Israel and Saudi Arabia. But the lease was renewable annually, so Portugal had every intention to use the Azores airbase as a bargaining chip.
Well, under the fascist regime of Portugal, Angola and Mozambique and Guinea-Bissau were part of Portugal. So the idea of giving up these colonies was unthinkable for that regime. So if we went to them and said, look, you must get out of Angola, we'll be very upset with you and all that, they might well have cut us out of the Azores. So NATO and the Cold War was far more important to us. There was a special law about not allowing U.S. arms given to Portugal to use them in Africa, but they did violate it, and we didn't do anything about it. In fact, we did not cut them off, even though we knew it, they were using them.
Nous n'avons pas même voulu nous mettre dans cette guerre-là entre l'Est et l'Ouest. Nous n'avons pas voulu, non. Mais malgré que beaucoup de gens disaient que ce sont des communistes, beaucoup de gens disaient ça, mais on n'avait pas de preuves. Comme disait Amilcar, nous étions des nationalistes africains, sans option idéologique.
Amilcar knew that it would be difficult to avoid labeling his movement, and having Cuban fighters would do little to dispel the belief that they were firmly allied to the Eastern Bloc. But he had a vision and a very clear strategy as to how to fight his battle for independence.
Es que Amílcar no llega pidiendo, deme hombre, mándeme hombre, ¿no? Teníamos la idea de que habíamos sacado ya del Congo, de que venían a venir más tropas de cubanos a ayudar a Amílcar. Y en aquel momento Amílcar no quería más tropas de cubanos.
Son los guineanos que tienen que luchar. Y tú metes un batallón ahí, va a ser el batallón y no los canguros. Y tienen que aprender mediante la lucha, prepararse para la victoria. Es una idea muy, aunque fuera un poco más larga la lucha, era una idea muy interesante de ir forjando en medio de la lucha la nación. Hay que forjar una nueva nación, además tribus diferentes, solo la lucha por unirla.
Che's defeat in the Congo was still a fresh wound, and Fidel began to consider how his help could be more effective. This time, the bulk of Cuban support came in the form of artillery experts, doctors, and technicians. Soldiers would go only if requested.
They also took some lessons from their debacle in Congo. In Guinea-Bissau, the involvement was quite different. It was more of, in a good sense, technical nature of helping local forces of PAGC, the army, especially helping in those specialities when they hadn't got enough expertise, you see, to fight Portuguese. So it's more of, in the good sense, supportive role, you see.
Amílcar had no illusions about his capacity to defeat the mighty Portuguese Empire. He wanted to wear them down in order to get them to the negotiating table.
En la conversación que tiene Amílcar conmigo, en el frente, él me explica, se basaba en no atacar los cuarteles con intenciones de tomarlos, porque no había suficiente fuerza en condiciones en ese momento para eso. Lo que quería era desangrar, hacerle bastante baja al enemigo y hacerle la vida imposible con ese tipo de combate. Hasta que se le haría la vida imposible en los cuarteles.
The war escalated, and the Portuguese sent 22,000 more soldiers. Amílcar's demoralization tactics had worked. The Portuguese felt trapped. Veteran captains from the colonial army in Guinea-Bissau decided to take the initiative in their own hands. It was they who overthrew the dictatorship, creating the Carnation Revolution in Portugal. And within months, the Portuguese colonial empire crumbled like a house of cards.
In this liberation movement, there was no military victory, never. And they did not destroy the colonial machine, but they created, even vis-à-vis Algeria and France for that matter, they created such a situation that before getting victory, they force the enemy to retreat, to come to some compromise. Usually it's in the form, it's compromise. In the essence, it's the victory of the liberation forces. That's exactly happened in each and every country.
The Portuguese army left Guinea-Bissau in October 1974. But the man who pushed the empire over the brink was not there to witness the fruits of his struggle. Amílcar Cabral was killed a year earlier by members of the Portuguese secret police. The who's who of revolutionaries gathered at Amílcar's tomb. Beside Fidel Castro stood Agostinho Neto, the leader of Angola's liberation movement. Cuba had for years been supporting Neto's movement, but the scale of Fidel Castro's military involvement in Angola after the collapse of the Portuguese Empire would soon change the face of the continent.
Okay, so I'm over time, and I didn't get to the documents. However, I will put a little brief synopsis of the documents in the group, which I think could at least continue for a week or so as a result of us having, the break last week for the conference, for the summit. But I'll stop there. I'll do, just because although I'm over time, I do want to respect somewhat time. And I just want to look at some of the comments in the chat. Okay, so I see a few. The name of the documentary is Cuba and African Odyssey. It's actually on YouTube. Both parts are usually combined on there. So you can see it, and it's in the groups. So the group, people who are actually in the groups, you can access it. It was posted the week before last, right, for the groups, readings and materials. Yes, the arrogance of the colonists is unlimited, for sure. The CIA agent, I don't know his name off the top of my head. You have to go back in the video. And I'm sort of glad I didn't commit his name to memory. So I won't call it, because he is deceased now and we don't want to give him life. But that being said, it is in the video. If you look up the film Cuba and African Odyssey, you will see him and his name, the CIA agent in the Congo. Yes, somebody put the name. Yes, the UN really serves the interest of the United States in many instances in most of the Western nations, right? Taking cases to the UN exposes it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that exposing it makes it actionable. And so that's an ongoing struggle. But, we've got to create our own entities that can mete out justice for us, right? Yes, Mobutu Sese Seko essentially was a puppet. Right, he was the head of the military. No, I'm always suspect when UN troops go into any African country and say they're there for a human rights issue. I'm always thinking, what is the capitalist interest and strategic interest in the region? The United States and the UN don't go anywhere where the West doesn't have a strategic interest in that part of the world, namely being resources. Absolutely, of the history all over the world. Oh, hi, Denise. The resources all over the world are exploited by Europeans. But yes, in the United States in particular, and in Africa in particular, where we have been colonized, the history has been infiltrated, right? They rewrite our history. That's why it's so important for those of us who know the history, recall the history, to share that, right? It's not enough to know the history of your oppressor. You need to know who you are. I had a professor at Tuskegee who always said, know or define yourself in the context of time and space. Well, you can't do that without understanding your history. I also know another educator who was proud to tell me that he knew all the king's history, meaning British history. And I said to him, and who are you? Do you know your history? Do you know who you are? It's not good enough for you to tell me who they are. We know who they are. Do you know who you are and what your role is and who you serve? You know, the last poet said, know what is opposite of you and know what it is that you know what it is that you have to do. Right? Any child that comes out of their own home not knowing who they are is a problem. And I think, unfortunately, we think that learning happens in schools. Schools are tools of socialization more than anything else by the dominant culture, by the imposed culture. Your job, all of our job, is to teach our children at home first. You know, so unfortunately, sometimes our children come out, or all too often, our children come out of our homes being anti-us and pro everyone else. And that works against our interests, but that falls in line with what I'm saying about colonialism, imperialism, white supremacy, and culture as a whole. It teaches us to work against our own best interest, right? And if you don't know who you are, how could you know what is in our interest, right? If you don't know who you are, how can you know what is in our interest? If you think you're someone else, then you will work in the interest of other people and against yourself. So this is why ideological development is important. As much as we can even show and talk about the armed struggles, no one picks up an arm, no one picks up a weapon without serious ideological development prior to that, because you must know why you are doing that. What is your interest? What is the ends that you are trying to achieve, right? So when we engage in struggle, even in the context of I Love Black People, when you do the work that you do, you need to know why you're doing it and whom you are doing it for, okay, ultimately. So I'm gonna leave it there. It's always been my pleasure. I hope you got something out of this session. And you know, of course, we'll have continued relations and all that kind of stuff. If I think I might be open on Facebook and others. If you want to continue to be in touch, you can friend me on there. We will obviously be in touch right through I Love Black People. I'm reading something in the chat. Malcolm states that in the return of the source means the pretended superiority of the culture of the dominant. Yes, exactly. Thank you all. Okay, Roland, thank you all. Okay, I appreciate you all. And I'm just going to end with what we say. I am because we are. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Wright. And also enjoy the rest of your weekend. I am because we are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.